Thank you. Let's get started for today's virtual education session, the role of research in Parkinson's. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bill Pache, and I'm the Executive Director for the American Parkinson Disease Association here in Massachusetts. Just a few points before we get started, and I'll introduce today's speakers. First of all, the APDA of Massachusetts has been in operation for decades and offers programs and services to the PD community in Massachusetts and surrounding states. We've received a large response for today's presentation. There's been tremendous progress in understanding and treating Parkinson's disease. PD is highly individualized from person to person. Not all that is discussed today is relevant to everyone. The healthcare team must be familiar with the signs and symptoms, treatment strategies, and how PD impacts the individual patient. Treating PD well requires a team approach. Today, we are providing information that is not intended as medical advice. What I'd like to do is introduce today's speakers for today's presentation. We're very happy to have two very well established and esteemed presenters for today's important topic on research. The first of which is Dr. Marie Saint-Hilaire. She's a professor of neurology and medical director of the Parkinson Disease and Movement Disorder Center at Boston University and Boston Medical Center. As a movement disorder specialist, she provides neurological care for individuals with Parkinson's. She has participated in over 100 clinical research studies and is the director of the APDA Advanced Center of Research at BU and currently serves on the APDA Scientific Advisory Board. She is the site principal investigator of a decade-long PPMI study funded by the Michael J. Fox Foundation and serves on the executive board of the Parkinson Study Group. So thank you, Marie. Dr. Terry Ellis is the associate professor at Boston University College of Health and Rehabilitation Science at Sargent College and is the chair of the Department of Physical Therapy and Athletic Training. Her research focuses on investigating the impact of exercise and rehabilitation on the progression of disability in individuals with Parkinson's disease. Dr. Ellis is also the director of the Center for Neurorehabilitation at Boston University, where she conducts research, provides clinical consultations and education to healthcare professionals and to persons with neurological disorders. In addition, Dr. Ellis directs the American Parkinson Disease Association National Rehabilitation Resource Center, housed at Boston University, and was recently named to our Scientific Advisory Board. So thank you, Dr. Ellis and Dr. Marie Saint-Hilaire. I'd like to transition now to Dr. Saint-Hilaire. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for this introduction and for the invitation to talk about research, which is a topic dear to my heart. So today we'll discuss the types of trials in Parkinson, the phases of the clinical trials, the roles of trials, and we will mention how to find trials if you're interested to participate. And there are benefits to participate in trials, and there are many types of trials for everybody's tastes and level of comfort. And finally, Dr. Ellis will review some of the current exercise trials. Next. Okay, so what is a clinical trial first? This is a definition from the World Health Organization. So it's any research study that assigns humans, not animals. There are trials in animals, but this is for humans, to one or more interventions to evaluate the outcome on their health. So in short, it's to determine if the treatments are safe and effective in people. Next. So the purpose of a clinical trials is to determine, of course, if a treatment is safe and effective. And there are several types of interventions. So I will discuss, I give you examples later on. Also, how to understand how an intervention affects an individual with a condition, and if try to apply it to a larger group of individuals. And also to understand how a therapy works. What is the dosage of a medication? How many times a day does it need to be taken? What are the interactions with other medications or the effect on other medical conditions that a participant might have? Next. Okay. So there are two types of studies, of trials. One is the interventional studies. So what we call more traditionally the clinical trials. So the participants are assigned to receive an intervention or no intervention, because often there's a placebo group. So one group receives the intervention, which could be various things, and we'll talk about that, or no intervention, the placebo. And the researchers can evaluate the effect of this intervention on the group of people and compare if they're doing better than the group of people who did not receive the intervention. So this is a trial, what we call a clinical trial. Then there are observational studies. So the researchers, there's no intervention. The researchers just observe the behavior or the health, or they collect data on a group of participants without any intervention or therapy. But this type of research is also extremely important. It's as regulated as the clinical trials. It's supervised by the institutional review board of any institution. And it's very regulated as an interventional study. So I'll give you an example how an observational study is very important. The one we know, because it's very local, is the Framingham Heart Study. So this is an observational study which has been taking place for over 60 years, and they followed a cohort of people and their children and their grandchildren. And it had a great impact not on public health, not only in the US, but around the world. This is how we discovered that really smoking or obesity or hypertension or high cholesterol were risk factors for heart disease and strokes. So this is an observational study which had a wonderful impact. So there is a large observational study at the moment taking place in Parkinson. It's called the PPMI study, funded by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And we're trying to get information about the natural history of Parkinson, the risk factors, and some biomarkers of the disease. So I just want to stress that if people are not interested to do an interventional study, they're a bit leery to take a new medication, you can still participate in some observational study because they're also very important. Next. Okay, so these are examples of interventional trials or clinical trials or interventional studies. They all very similar, describe the similar things. So I mentioned new medications to treat the symptoms of Parkinson or to slow down the progression of Parkinson. There are new ways to deliver medications. So trials of long-acting levodopa, for example. We're studying new indications for previously approved medication. One of them, for example, is a medication that is used in diabetes that we're testing to see if it slows down the progression of Parkinson. There are surgical studies, so studies of deep brain stimulation or transplantation of genes, gene therapy are also considered clinical trials. And even treatment that are not medical or surgical, such as rehabilitation. So studies of exercise, occupational therapy, speech therapy, or even some intervention to help anxiety or depression in Parkinson's. So there were some interventional studies of the effect of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to treat anxiety and Parkinson. These are all examples of interventional trials in Parkinson. And as you see, some of them do not involve medications. Next. And these are studies, examples of observational studies in Parkinson's disease. So I mentioned a big study looking for biomarkers, the PPMI study funded by Michael J. Fox. Biomarkers are characteristics of the disease that can be tested. So for example, how do we make a diagnosis of Parkinson? You know, it's mostly clinical, but we're trying to find a blood test or something in the spinal fluid or the urine, the saliva, or the skin to make a better diagnosis. What are the risk factors for Parkinson's? What is the natural history of people's physical activity when they are diagnosed with Parkinson? How does the cognition and the mood progress or are affected in Parkinson's? So there's no intervention. We just see patients and follow them sometimes for a long period of time. As you heard, the PPMI study has been going on for over 10 years. Some are very short, so just like the cognitive behavioral studies can be much shorter. There are certain studies of biomarkers that are just one visit. So there's a wide variety of these observational studies. Next. So when you develop a medication, why does it take so long? It takes about 6 and 11 years for a drug to obtain the approval by the FDA because it has to go through several phases. Next, so I'll go through each phase. So the first phase is the preclinical phase, which is usually in the lab or in animals. It's just to be sure there's no red flag in the animal trials, showing that there is some support to try that medication for the disease, and it appears fairly safe to go to the human phase of the trial. And there's about only 5 and 5,000 compounds in preclinical stages that go on to be tested in humans. Next. So the phase 1 is when the medication or the compound is tested in a very small group of people. And usually they are healthy volunteers. So it's really to see if there's any risk of obvious side effect of that medication. And if it passes phase 1, it goes to phase 2, which tested in about 80 or sometimes a few hundred volunteers who have the condition. So people who have Parkinson. And this is mostly to find the dosage, what's the best dose? Are there any safety issues with the medication? Is it safe to give it to a larger group of people? But usually these trials are too small to assess the efficacy of the medication. It's more for dosage finding and safety. Next. And then in phase 3, so phase 3 are really the important phase of trial for medication. So this is when the medication is tested on a large number of people who have the condition. So a large number of people have Parkinson's disease. Usually it's a few hundred patients. They're multi-center studies. They can be multi-centers in the US, often US and Canada, and sometimes it's all over the world. And this really what the FDA requires to approve the medication. So the data collected during the phase 3 studies are important to get the medication approved by the FDA. This is what the company will need to get their medication on the market. So this is a very, very important part of the medication testing. And there are some medications who fail even in phase 3, even if they went through phase 1 and phase 2 pretty well. they found out in phase 3 that they were not really effective. And the FDA sometimes reject the application of this medication. Next. And then there's phase 4. So phase 4 is really after the medication is approved. So it's ongoing monitoring on the risks or side effects of the medication, because once the medication is approved, many people try it, and many people at various phases of the disease, people on different medications who have different medical conditions. Usually in phase 3, the people who get into the phase 3 studies are very, very specifically chosen. They're in strict inclusion and exclusion criteria. In phase 4, when the medication is on the market, anybody can take it. In theory, if you have insurance and it's covered, and that's another issue. So, you know, a lot of people try the medication, and that's when you can discover side effects which were rare and were not observed during the phase 3 study. But when a lot of people take the medication, that's when you discover some serious side effects. So, for example, I'll give two very well-known examples. In Parkinson's disease, there was a medication called Pergolide or Permax, which is not on the market anymore because they found out, you know, when the medication had been approved for a few years, although it was very effective for the symptoms of Parkinson, it would cause a condition called lung or pulmonary fibrosis, which is, you know, untreatable. So they had to remove it from the market. So this is an example of phase 4 study, which resulted in the Parkinson medication taken off the market. Next. So who sponsors the study? There are many potential sponsors. So we think about the government, especially NIH, National Institute of Health, but the Department of Defense has sponsored studies in Parkinson. Of course, industry sponsors a lot of the clinical trials for new medications, such as, you know, any new, you know, dopamine agonist or any medication to antibodies against alpha-synuclein. They all have been sponsored by pharmaceutical industries. There are some medication trials that are sponsored by NIH, in fact, because there are certain medications or supplements that don't belong to anybody. So there's no pharmaceutical company that would sponsor that study. And a big example was the study of inosine, which was a supplement that increases uric acid. It was tried recently to see if it slows down progression of Parkinson. It does not, but that study was sponsored by foundations and by NIH because there was no pharmaceutical industry that, you know, that had that supplement. So you had to go through other ways to fund that clinical trial. And there are foundations who sponsor or co-sponsor a clinical trial or a study or provide research funding. So, for example, the American Parkinson's Disease Association can sponsor clinical trials or studies. The Michael J. Fox Foundation has given money for some research. The Parkinson study groups, which is a big group of academic medical centers involved in Parkinson research, can sponsor or fund a study. The Parkinson Foundation also sponsors studies. So there are some funding coming from private foundations too. Next. So the clinical study design, just to let you know a little bit what we talk about when we talk about open label or placebo-controlled. Open label is everyone receives the intervention, the drug or the therapy, and we see at the end if people are better at the end of the study compared to what they were at the beginning. And then there's randomized control, where there is a group of participants who receives the intervention and another group who doesn't. So either placebo or no intervention, and people are randomly assigned to each group. So the gold standard for trial of medication is the double-blind placebo-controlled study, where the participants are separated into the group receiving the medication or the placebo group, and neither the participant nor the researcher knows who is assigned to which group. Okay, so this is really the gold standard of research when we want to get the medication on the market. And I'll let Dr. Ellis discuss how she does her physical intervention study, because obviously this is different for some other interventions. But for the medications, this is how we prove that a medication is effective. Next. So how do you, if you're interested to participate in a trial, how do you find which trials are available? So your healthcare team, of course, should be able to tell you what are the trials around in the area. They might not know everything in the country or in the world. I have to say, I don't know everything that is done all over the world for trials. But there's a website called clinicaltrials.gov. You can go to. There's also the Fox Trial Finders, another website. And if you're looking for local trials in your area, so in New England, because we're New England, the website of the APDA, the Massachusetts chapter, keeps a list of all the trials that are done locally. Next. So I just want to mention some of the trials, some ongoing trials that are done in the area. One of I mentioned before, the PPMI, which is an observational study to try to find a biomarker for Parkinson's. So people have been followed, some of the people in that study have been followed for 10 years. And we see them regularly and do blood tests, and now we do skin biopsies, and we do neurological exams to see how the Parkinson progress. And there are some healthy control in that study too. So it's a way for family members or friends who want to do something for Parkinson's disease to participate in research, because they can be a control in that type of study. Another study that's taking place is called the Neurorehabilitation study. So this is the study of a medication that is approved and is on the market for diabetes. But it studies to see if, given early in Parkinson's disease, newly diagnosed Parkinson patients, if we would slow down the progression of Parkinson. So this study is still enrolling. There's a very interesting study called TOPAZ. So it's to prevent fractures in Parkinson. And not only Parkinson's disease, any type of Parkinsonism. There are various forms of Parkinsonism, from strokes, from medication, from some other atypical forms of Parkinson, but anybody who has Parkinsonism can participate in that study if they're over the age of 60. And it's to see if they're giving a medication that is approved, that is on the market for osteoporosis, a medication called Reclast, if it would prevent fractures. So it's one visit. The patients, they come to visit the patients in their own home to give either the medication or the placebo, and then they follow them by phone. So that's something pretty easy to do. There's a study research. This one is for deep brain stimulation. It's an observational study funded by the Parkinson Study Group. It's just following up a group of people who've had deep brain stimulation and see how they do over a period of time. Synuclein 1 study, which is also a biomarker study. It's really a one-time visit, and it's a skin biopsy because we know that the alpha-synuclein, the abnormal protein that accumulates in the brain of people who have Parkinson. We could diagnose it or look at it by a skin biopsy. So people come in, it's a 1-visit study, and we do skin biopsies, 3 skin biopsies, and see if they have that abnormal protein in the skin, and see if that could be used to diagnose Parkinson. And they'll give you the results of the biopsy after if it's evaluated. So it's interesting. You get the result of that study. And then there's, if you're interested in research, but you don't want to be poked, or you don't want to, try medication, there's study of, for example, of light therapy to help with the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease, if it helps with your sleep and your mood. So that's also on our APDMA website. Next. So what are the advantages of participating in research? So first, you can see movement disorder specialists because at your visits, because we are the ones who do the research. And you're monitored very, very closely by the team, and you have a direct line to the team, because we want to be sure that anybody who's a participant, if they have any problem, can reach us. So it's a way to work very, very closely with your movement disorder team. Some people live in other cities, but come to Boston for research, for example, because they can visit their friends and families, and the transportation is reimbursed. So those all benefit. The other thing is, you also have a feeling that you're participating in the fight against Parkinson. And as I mentioned, even people who don't have Parkinson sometimes could participate in research for Parkinson as healthy controls. And there are, some studies are very short with 1 or 2 visits. Some studies are very long. Some studies will reimburse you for your transportation, but some also studies will give you some stipend for participating in the study. And there are, as also mentioned, there are many types of research. So it's easy to find a type of study with which you feel comfortable. So you feel comfortable doing, depending on your level of comfort, trying new medication or surgeries, or just having a biopsy, or answering some of the studies, or just answering questionnaires. So I will let Dr. Ellis describe the studies she's doing with exercise.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Saint-Hilaire, for a very informative presentation. And thank you, Bill, for inviting me to come to speak today. And thank you to the APDA of Massachusetts for putting on this presentation today. So like Dr. Saint-Hilaire said, I'm going to give a couple of examples of clinical trials in the area of exercise. And so the 2 trials I'm going to talk about one is a phase 3 clinical trial. So this is a big trial. I'll explain in more detail in a minute, but we're looking to compare 2 different doses of exercise. And this trial is offered in many locations all over the country. And then I'm going to talk about a phase 2 clinical exercise trial that's happening here at Boston University and at Washington University in St. Louis. And the focus of that is on walking health. The name of that study is Walking Health is Paramount in Parkinson's Disease. And we abbreviate that by calling it WITPD. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to start off with what we call the SPARKS trial. This is a study in Parkinson's disease of exercise. That's what the SPARK stands for. And the 3 is a phase 3 clinical trial. So these are some of our team members. We have Dr. Shi, who is the principal investigator along with myself here at BU. And then there's Mike, who's our study coordinator. So if people are interested in the trial, they talk to Mike first. And then Tim is our physical therapist here at Boston University, and he works with all the people with Parkinson's to make sure that they're doing the exercise program correctly. And then we have our nurse specialist, Kathy Thomas, who helps with some of the measures that we do. Okay, next slide. So what is this study all about, the SPARKS-3 study? So we know from some animal models that there seems to be an effect of exercise on the brain of, rodents. And so from that work, we understand that there are certain changes that happen in the brain that might benefit people with Parkinson's disease. We also know that there are some sort of general effects on brain health. There's been some small studies in humans that are encouraging, also showing the potential impact of exercise on the brain. In fact, the study that preceded the SPARKS-3 trial showed that people who engaged in treadmill exercise seemed to have a decrease in severity of their motor symptoms. So the question is, does exercise actually decrease the progression of the disease? And we're trying to sort that out through implementing this study. So in this study, we measure what's happening in the brain, and we also measure changes in behavior down here. We measure changes in walking, we measure changes in thinking, changes in mood, those kinds of things. Next slide. So like I said here, just click one more time, Rosemary. We can see here is that this SPARKS-3 trial is offered at 29 sites across the United States and Canada. It's led by Daniel Korkos, who's at Northwestern University. And you can see here, BU is one of the sites, and we are just starting now. So we're enrolling now, so it's a great time to hear more about this study. Next slide. So what does this study involve? So basically what we're doing in this study, the good thing is that everybody that enrolls in this study exercises. And we're comparing two different kinds of exercise. Exercise at a high intensity, which is defined as 80 to 85% of a heart rate maximum. So really sort of more rigorous exercise. And then here we're comparing that to 60 to 65%, so a moderate intensity exercise. Because we don't know if there's an advantage of one kind of exercise over another, one dose over another. We know the good news about this study is we know there are benefits of both. We know that people will benefit in many different ways from participating in exercise, no matter what group they're in. And what we're trying to understand is whether one has a somewhat of an advantage over the other. So in this particular study, people can be referred, people with Parkinson's disease can be referred from their doctor, or they can self-refer. They can call the site and say, I want to learn more about the study. And then they undergo a screening process to make sure that they meet the certain criteria that's necessary to be in the study. And then they'll consent to be in the study if they qualify. And then we are going to enroll across the country 370 people with Parkinson's disease. So it's a big study. And then people will be randomized to one of these two groups and then participate in assessments at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 24 months. So it goes out quite a while, because what we really want to know, if you're looking for the impact of exercise on the disease severity, then we want to follow people, for a couple of years so that we can actually see what kind of impact the exercise has. Next slide. So what does it specifically involve? What does the exercise involve? So the exercise is walking on a treadmill. So, and people can walk on a treadmill either at a local gym, or they can, will actually purchase a treadmill, and people can, use the treadmill right in their home. For people that go to a gym, we actually pay for the gym membership. And so for the first couple of weeks of the study, people have to come into our site at Boston University to learn how to do the program, and so that we can teach people exactly, what to do on the treadmill, how hard to work, how fast to walk. We monitor people carefully, we monitor their heart rate, and then once they understand how to do the exercise program, then they can do it either at home or at a local gym. And then they come in a couple of times a month over the course of 2 years just to check in, to make sure that the exercise is still, at the right dose. Okay, next slide. And so what are we actually interested in measuring? And so one of the things we measure at the end, the doctor, many of you have had that test done where the doctor looks at the speed of your movement and your hands and your legs and the stiffness. So that's a clinical measure of the motor signs of Parkinson's disease. So that's one of the outcomes we're interested in. Does the exercise actually reduce the severity of those motor symptoms? We're also interested in what happens to walking, what happens to the speed of walking, the quality of walking. So we're going to be measuring, some aspects of walking. There's also a brain scan that's done to see if there's any changes due to exercise in the area of the brain that's most impacted by Parkinson's disease. And then we also do some blood tests so that we can see there's some markers in the blood that provide some information about overall brain health that we want to learn more about. Next slide. So who's eligible to participate in this study? So in this study, we're looking for people who have been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in the last 3 years. And also people that have not yet started taking any Parkinson's medications. So it's people sort of early on. And also people that are willing to take part in a regular treadmill exercise program. We ask people to exercise 4 days a week. So that's about every other day for about 1.5 years, and then participate in study assessment visits for about 2 years, every 6 months or so. And the age we're looking for is anybody between 40 and 80, and people who are not already participating in a high intensity structured exercise program. Okay, next slide. So if people are interested in this study, you can call Mike Stevenson. So that's the picture I showed you earlier of our study coordinator. His phone number here is on the slide here, 617-638-7747. And you can also reach him via his email address, which is here on the slide. Next slide. And then the other study I want to talk about is called WITPD, Walking Health is Paramount in Parkinson's Disease. So next, this is funded by NIH, and Dr. Saint-Hilaire is actually part of this study as well as other people in the Center for Neurorehab and at Boston Medical Center. And this is, again, funded by NIH. Next slide. So why are we looking at walking in Parkinson's disease? Why is walking so important? Well, there was a study done several years ago asking people with Parkinson's disease, what do you really want from your treatment? What is most important to you? And one of the things that came in the top of the list was walking. People were very interested in, improving walking function or preventing a decline in walking function and, maintaining overall mobility and independence. Next slide. What we know from monitoring people, this was an observational study that Dr. Saint-Hilaire talked about earlier. We observed people with Parkinson's for over a year without providing any kind of exercise intervention. And we noticed a decline in the amount of walking that people did by about 12% in a year. We also saw a decline of about 40% in the moderate intensity minutes of walking. So that's fast walking. So basically, people with Parkinson's were doing less over the course of the year, and they were walking more slowly. And so we want to intervene to prevent this from happening. Next slide. So one of the premises of this study is that, okay, people with Parkinson's disease generally know the benefits of exercise. They want to be exercising, but it's hard. It's hard to do it consistently. So as part of this study, we have a physical therapist that partners with people with Parkinson's disease to help make exercise a habit in everyday life, making it a routine, making it part of one's daily activities, so that it becomes sort of a regular part of a routine and it's not so hard to fit in. Next slide. So in this study, in the WITPD study, people with Parkinson's undergo a baseline assessment of a lot of it is around walking. And then we measure people's walking activity in the community. So we give people a sensor to wear on their ankle that monitors some aspects of walking. And then people are randomized to one of two groups. The good thing about this study, just like the SPARK study, is that everybody exercises. Both groups do the same exercise program. One of them, the exercise program, is delivered with instructions and pictures, so using printed pictures. And the other program is delivered using a mobile health technology or an app, an application. In that application, we upload videos of the exercise program and instructions for the walking program. So people use that app to help support them in their exercise, or they use a sort of traditional pictures, with instructions. So everybody gets the exercise program. And then we assess people at 3 months, 6 months, and then a year. So the reason the study is a year is because the key to exercise is to be able to integrate it in your life over the long term. So we're trying to get people to really get in the habit, and we help people over the course of the year so that they can be successful doing this. Next slide. So we use a particular app, and we give people either an iPad or, to put their exercise program on, or if people would prefer to use their own iPad or their phone, then we put the app on their phone so that they can use it, as easily as possible. And people see the exercises come up on the iPad, they see their progress, they see how well they're doing over the course of time. Next slide. And then, like I was saying earlier, people are paired or partner with a physical therapist. Our physical therapist, Teresa Baker, is delivering this intervention to both groups. And she is taking on the role of a coach, and she really works at trying to figure out how to enhance motivation to exercise, how to overcome barriers that can get in the way of exercising. And we do this on a very individual level. So each person has their own goals, their own sort of things that get in the way, their own habits that they're trying to form. So it's really an individualized program. Next slide. And one of the things we do is we help people identify a personal goal. So we all know that exercising for the sake of exercising is good for fitness. But the reason most people are able to successfully engage in exercise is because there's a bigger goal, there's a bigger picture, there's a bigger personal goal. Like, what do you really value in life? Why do you want to exercise? Because you want to continue working and you want to travel to France here. You want to, do all of the things that you set out to do, spend time with grandchildren, go hiking, all those kinds of things. So we tailor the exercise program to try to help people reach their personal goal. Next slide. And so what do we measure in the end? We want to see a major outcome is improvement in walking. So this is the sensor that we have people wear for a few days at various intervals across the study. And the information that's collected on the sensor about walking helps us understand the specific improvements that we see in walking. And then we also look at the motor signs of Parkinson's disease so that we can see if there's any change in the severity of the motor symptoms across the year. This study involves just 8 visits to BU over the course of about 3 months. And otherwise, the exercise program is done in your own home. And because of the pandemic, we've become very creative. And actually, in some instances, we can actually send the therapist to people's home to do some of the treatment. So we can be very flexible. So people are interested in sort of getting going and want some support exercising or want to focus on improving their walking, then this study might be very helpful. Next slide. So who's eligible for this one? Many more people are eligible for our WITPD study. Just having a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease and being able to walk without assistance from another person for at least 10 continuous minutes. And basically able to come to some physical therapy sessions and evaluation sessions at the Center for Neurorehab at BU. But like I said, some of these visits could be done at home. And next slide. So if you're interested in learning more about this particular study, in this study, we have enrolled so far 100 people across our site and in St. Louis. And we're looking to enroll about 50 more. And so people who are interested can call Jamie Gurnis here at 617-358-6157, or you can email Jamie at witpd@bu.edu. Next slide. So we want to thank you all for listening and tuning in, and we hope that you'll contribute to research and ask some questions, give us a call, find out more about it. And, we're here to help you and to learn from you. So, feel free to reach out and we'll answer your questions as best we can. Thank you.
Good, thank you. We've got a few questions from the field. The first of which is for Dr. Saint-Hilaire. Dr. Saint-Hilaire, the question is, if I participate in a research study, will I find out the results or what group I was in?
Yes. So it may take a while though, because you could be in a study and then the study ends for you because it's 1 year, but not everybody has finished the study. So after everybody is done with the study, they close the study. The sponsor of the study closes the study and analyzes the results. And once the results are ready and ready to be published or submitted by the FDA, then they will tell the site. So the site where you had where you were a participant, in what group you were, and if you received the medicine or the placebo. And the site will contact you with this information. So, but it might take, a year or 2 years, it might take quite a while after you have done your part in this study before the results are available.
That's great. And now I have a few questions for Dr. Ellis. Mm-hmm. Dr. Ellis, in your opinion, do you think research has slowed down with the pandemic?
Well, at the very beginning, it slowed down. I think the whole world slowed down. And then, gradually, so that was about the spring, March, April of 2020. And then by the time the summer came, the late summer, early fall, we started to pick things up again and reopen. I think what's happened in the pandemic is we've become more creative. So like I was saying in the WITPD study, sometimes we can actually send the therapist to people's homes, so that they won't have to travel in, for example. And sometimes we actually did some of the interventions on telemedicine, some of the sessions. And so we became, very creative so that we could keep research going. I think everybody in the community wants us to, keep going with the research so we can keep learning more. So we're very committed to trying to move things forward.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. One more question for you, Dr. Ellis. How long is the WITPD walking study?
Yeah, so people are enrolled in the study for a period of a year, but the visits for the therapist with the therapist are mostly in the first 3 months or so. And then there's some remote connection to the therapist through the mobile health app if people are in that condition. And, people come back to BU for assessments at 3 months, 6 months, and a year so that we can see how people are doing. But the whole idea is to keep people exercising over the long term. So even when the study ends, the hope is people will continue on and keep exercising.
Good, thank you. Last question that we have is for you, Dr. Marie Saint-Hilaire, which is, would I find out if there is a new side effect from the medicine while participating in the study? And then additionally, once the new medicine is FDA approved, how do I find out on the information on any side effects?
Yeah, so when you are in the research trial and there is a new side effect discovered on that medication, the trial team is informed very, very quickly, and we have to tell every participant very, very quickly. So if anything happens during the trial, there's some people monitoring the trial, what we call a safety monitoring board for each trial. And if the safety monitoring board finds that there's something, that a new side effect from a medication, they tell all the teams, and urgently we, tell the participants. So this is very, easy to know. If you're in the study, you will know. After, it's after the medication has been approved, if there's a new side effect to the medication that is discovered, then it's your physician who should know about that, because we do receive updates from pharmacies and FDA about new side effects that have been discovered in medications, and sometimes it requires more monitoring. I'll give an example. There was a medication called tolcapone, which is very effective but not used very much. But it was found that it could be toxic for the liver. So maybe a year after it was approved and on the market, when people had developed liver problems, they send a notice to all the physicians who prescribe tolcapone. If you have, patients on tolcapone, you have to follow these strict monitoring guidelines for the patients, for their liver. So, so after the medication is on the market, it should be your physician who would tell you if there are new side effects. Good.
Thank you. I've got one more late question that I'll ask first, Dr. Ellis, and then Dr. Saint-Hilaire. The question that we have on the table is, in your view, what is the most promising area of research as it relates to Parkinson's disease these days? And so first, you, Dr. Ellis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think, the SPARKS-3 trial is very exciting because it's, we've done exercise trials for many, many years now. And this is a more sort of definitive trial in being able to really understand the sort of best dose of exercise and the impact that it has on many aspects of people with Parkinson's disease, the brain, different behaviors, thinking ability, all those kinds of things. So it's really exciting that we're getting closer, to having more answers that tell us about really what is exercise doing, for people with Parkinson's disease.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Same question for you, Dr. Saint-Hilaire. What is the most promising research in your view?
Well, I do like the exercise trial a lot, so I'll mention that too. But I like the biomarkers trial, trying to find a way to diagnose more efficiently Parkinson's disease, for example, through skin biopsies, which are very easy to do and access. And some of the trials that are done for genetic forms of Parkinson, there's specific medications for those type of Parkinson's disease. And you know, we test them first in people who have genetic Parkinson, but they could be more expendable to the general, you know, population with Parkinson disease. So it's not impossible that it would have some more expanded benefit.
Good, thank you. I wanted to thank both Dr. Ellis and Dr. Marie Saint-Hilaire for a wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much. Wealth of information. What our plan will be is that this educational session is recorded. We'll share it. We'll get it up on our YouTube page. We'll also plan to get it up on our, you know, in our newsletters. And so hopefully you'll be able to get it and share it with anybody that you think might want a little bit more information in the area of research. From an infrastructure standpoint, we have an information referral center here in Boston at Boston University Medical Campus. We'll share the phone number in our follow-up email. We also, across the entire country, the APDA has education and support groups as well as health and fitness programs. Next slide, please. Also, if you have the opportunity, make sure that you connect with your local chapter. We've got chapters all across the entire US. We're also on various social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as we operate a website. I want to thank both Dr. Ellis and Dr. Marie Saint-Hilaire for a wonderful presentation today. I hope everybody actually has a wonderful day, and please look forward to our next presentation. Our plan is to do these on a monthly basis. If you have any feedback on the topic or anything that you'd like to see, please let us know. Again, thank you, Dr. Ellis and Dr. Saint-Hilaire. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.